So let's kind of look at what we want to cover today. Before we kind of delve into today, we want to recap over something we touched on last week because we're going to mention it again today. And that was the idea of something we called an array. So if you remember that last week, we looked at arrays. So in last week's home challenge, we asked you, what do you collect? Okay, so we asked you to look around your house. Was it books? Corey gave the example of Harry Potter books, for example, and that there was 7 of them in her collection and so on, and talked about it that way. So we asked you to go off, and with that knowledge, we wanted you to think about that collection as an array and then identify 4 different things for us. So we wanted you to look at the length of the array, or the size of the collection, the sort, the index, and the type. Okay, so I'm going to show you what I used as an example. So right now, in the current situation we're in, one of the pastimes I've picked up a lot is colouring. Okay, so the idea of lots of colouring with whether it's markers or colouring pencils or anything like that. All right, so I have loads of markers here, and I want to go through how I have organised them, or organised my collection. So the first question there was an array length. So Corey, if I look at my array, or my markers, if everyone can see them there, we can see, what's the length of my array there?
Let me see. Ooh, 7.
Yeah.
Am I right?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So my array length is actually 7. Okay, so that's the array length, the kind of the number in the collection. Now, in terms of sort, that's kind of how I've chosen to organize them. So I don't know if you can see at home, but what I've actually done is I've tried to kind of go as closely to the colors of the rainbow as I can. So I don't know how you guys learned. Corey, you said you used a song for the colors of the rainbow?
Yeah, I always went red and yellow and pink, but supposedly not everyone does that.
Okay, I use the very classic Richard of York gave Battle in Vain. So red, orange, yellow, green, and I have 2 greens. Battles of blue, indigo, which I don't have, and then violet or purple. So that's kind of the way I've sorted my collection. Okay, that's the order I put them in. So that's sort. Now, index is an interesting one. And in programming, when we think about indexes, we tend to index by starting at the number 0. So in that instance, I would have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So say, for example, give me a number, Corey. Just call out a number for my
4.
4. So if Corey calls out 4 in my index, the quickest way for me to find it is to go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that will be number 4, okay? Because we've started at 0, remember. All right, so that's what we would normally do with our array. And in that instance, that's much quicker than Corey trying to say, I want this color green and it's between the darker green and the darker blue. That would take ages. Whereas when she just said 4, I was able to quickly find it. And that's the point, that we can really quickly identify what we're looking for in our array. And then finally, the type. So Corey, what's my type here?
You have some markers.
Markers. So it's just literally the type of collection I have. So hopefully you're able to do that at home. It was just to give you an idea of arrays because, like I said, we are going to be going into more detail on them today as well. Okay. Now, before we get started today, we did start the game we're currently working on last week. So if you didn't save the game, or if you're just joining us after kind of maybe a break from looking at Arcade before, you can go and retrieve that code file from last week so that you start at the same point that we'll start on today. So if you go to our Wakelet collection, which is aka.ms/homespace files, you will see that on that page, if you scroll down a bit, we have our Make Code Arcade area. So at that area, then if you just click here on Wakelet collection, what you'll see is a page with all of our arcade resources, and down towards the end, you'll see this. Okay, so Arcade Game 2, Week 1, and that's the code file. So what we need you to do is download that. So just click and save that to a location. So for example, you'll see that I saved mine just really quickly to the desktop, so that when you join us in our browser and Arcade, you can just import that file and start off at the exact same point that I'm about to start off in a second. So if you need to pause and go to that website, go to Arcade and get the file, please do so now, because I'm going to hop into my browser and get going. Okay. Okay, so we are in my browser now. I hope everyone can see that.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, brilliant. And we're going to go and enter our web address, remember? So arcade.makecode.com. So we're familiar with that at the moment. Let that load up. And there's going to be no projects here for me. You guys might have saved. If you joined us last week to start off this game, you might have already got it saved. So you'll be able to hop straight back in. But remember, if you didn't join us, you should have saved that file that we just explained. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go and import that file. I'm going to click on import and I'm going to say import the file from my computer, browse for it. And like I said, I actually saved it to the desktop. So I'm going to go arcade game 2 week 1 and open that up. Okay, so here we go. Go ahead. So this is the exact file that we've put on our wakelet. So when you do the same thing, this is what you should see in front of you. And it's the game we began last week, and we did a lot of stuff last week. We'll just really quickly recap over that in a second. So remember last week what we did was we created a brand new tile map for our game that was quite long, okay, so quite wide. And we created our sprite Bubbles, who's on the screen right now. And what we got Bubbles to do is we control that Bubbles can move along, okay, along our tile map, lands on all of these different platforms. And as Bubbles is going, she's collecting different hearts and collecting lives. So every time we click A, we got Bubbles to jump, if you remember. And the aim of the game was collect all the love hearts and basically get to the end without falling through the cracks. Okay, so get to the tree, that was our end goal, remember, and we won. If we fell through the gaps in between our platforms, we got trapped and it was game over. Okay, so we did a lot of code. That even there, Corey, it looks really quick, doesn't it?
Yeah, but there's so much behind it.
There's so much behind it, yeah. So that's what we did last week, and that's where we got to with our code. Now, so if you didn't join us last week and you've opened this up and you're like, what is this? You can go with us today, but it could be worthwhile looking back using the link we just shared with you, looking back on last week's as well, just to kind of get a feel for what we did to get to this point. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and refresh and start looking at what we can do with our game today. Now, we're going to begin by looking at some things that people have actually asked us to do, really, isn't it, Corey? Like, people have asked questions about a few things and we want to address them before we build a little bit more on what the game will involve. So one of the first things was, if you notice here, at the start of the game, Bubbles is actually kind of landing literally on the edge, okay? So Bubbles is positioned right at the edge of this platform. Bit dangerous because there's a big gap there that Bubbles could fall through. We don't want to happen. What would be ideal, really, Corey, really would be to get Bubbles to start back a bit. Would I be right?
Yeah, definitely. Like more towards the start of the game there.
Yeah, so kind of here on the screen, okay? So what we want to do is set Bubbles' position to be back a little bit further. So Bubbles is obviously our sprite, our player sprite. So we're going to go into our sprites and we are going to say set. So we're going to grab that one. And remember, we want this to happen when the game starts. So literally when the game begins. So we're going to put this here. So just make sure it doesn't fall within that loop because it's something to do with this. So we're going to put that there. Okay, so perfect. So we are going to set Bubbles. So remember, not my sprite, Bubbles. And set Bubbles position to and select here with our X, Y axis. So I'm going to go into X and I want it literally, when we're looking at the kind of a cross area, I want to be as close to the left hand side as possible. So I'm going to just kind of go to like 4 there even. So it's literally kind of, as you can see, very close to the edge of the screen. And on Y then, now remember, Bubbles will actually fall in. So if I actually just even go to around there, Bubbles will fall the rest of the way. So if we watch, that should happen now. Woo. Perfect. Are we happy with that, Corey?
Yeah, that looks good. Lovely.
Okay, brilliant. Now, so that's the first thing we wanted to fix because people were asking us about it. The second thing we want to do is, we talked about this a lot actually.
Yeah, that's my favorite part.
Yeah, we want Bubbles to be facing the right way. So when Bubbles is going this direction towards the right hand side of her screen, she's facing the right direction. But when we go back, remember, when we go to the left hand side of the screen, you can see she's still facing the other way. So it's like she's walking backwards. Okay, moonwalking. So we want Bubbles to flip. Okay, if she's going towards the left hand side, we want her to be facing that way. If she's going to the right hand side, we can see she is facing that way. So every time the game updates, the best way for us to do this is to get the game to check what direction and what way is Bubbles facing or moving. Because if we can tell the game that if Bubbles is moving in a certain direction at a certain speed, okay, then we can actually dictate what happens. So if Bubbles is moving to the right-hand side of the screen, we can tell them leave it because it's fine. But if Bubbles is moving to the left, we can say actually flip it, okay? So we're going to do that every time the game updates. So where will I find that block, Corey, for the game updates?
Try in game, see if we see it there.
Yeah, okay, perfect. So I'm going to go into game. And here we go. Now there's two options here, but we want this to happen like literally every time. So not like not over a certain time frame, literally every frame. So let's go in and just get that one on its own on game update. Okay. Now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure that the game knows that when it updates, Bubbles' image is to be as it is right now. So we're going to make sure the game knows on game update, set Bubbles' image to be this, but then we'll decide if it needs to change. Okay. So we're going to go into our Sprites category. And we're going to go down, and down the bottom of Sprites, there's an area that says image, okay? And in here you can see set my sprite image to. So I'm going to grab that and pop that in. Okay. So set my sprite. So again, we change that to Bubbles. So set Bubbles image to. And we're basically just telling the game that when you update, we want it to be the image that we decided earlier on. So we're going to go into gallery. I'm going to go back down and find that image that we always use for Bubbles. Okay, so this one here. And click done. Now, if you need to pause, remember, pause, please. Get to the point where you're happy, okay? So on game update, set Bubbles image to this, all right? Now, remember what we want to say. So if I'm moving in this direction at this speed, that's okay. But remember, if I'm going back this way, I want Bubbles to her image to flip, okay? So you hear me saying the word if there, Corey, don't you? So if something happens, then. So if you remember, we looked at this last week, didn't we?
Yeah, we usually find that in logic, don't we?
Yeah. So our conditional statements, really important in our coding programs. So logic, we have our conditional statements, and we're going to grab our if true then block, and that's going to build upon our sequence underneath here, okay? So we want to basically say to the game, if Bubbles, and I'm going to move across here so you can see what I'm trying to explain. We want to say to the game, if Bubbles is moving towards the left-hand side of the screen, we want the image to be different. Then flip this image for us, okay? Now, we need to think carefully. We're going to have to use our x-axis here, okay, and our velocity, because remember, Bubbles is moving in that direction, so there's velocity involved, okay? And we're going to have to use our kind of figures here with our x-axis. So true isn't going to work for us. We need to bring another block in there. So we'll go and get a comparison block. So we're going to go into logic, and we have this block here. Okay, so we're going to grab this one. If 0 is less than 0, we're going to obviously change that in a second. So I'm going to grab that one and pop that in underneath here. Okay, now we want to say if Bubbles, and I'm going to go back into my game up here if you watch my game, if Bubbles' velocity on X is going to the left-hand side of the screen. Now you need to think about this in terms of figures. The left-hand side on the x-axis, if I'm going backwards towards the left-hand side, Corey, is that going to be positive or negative?
It's going to be negative.
Correct. It's going to be negative. So Bubbles' velocity towards the left-hand side of the screen is going to be negative numbers. And obviously negative numbers are less than 0. So we're going to leave less than, and we're going to leave 0. And what we need to find is Bubbles' velocity on X for here. Okay, and we did use these last week. So I'm going to hop into Sprites, and I'm going to go down, and you can see we have this block here. Okay, and it doesn't have the exact things we want right now, but remember it has arrows, so we can change it. So we're going to drag that one in and pop that one in here. Okay, so we're saying if Bubbles velocity on X, because we're talking about her moving left and right. So Vx, velocity on X, is less than 0. So she's going back the way, okay, back towards the left-hand side of the screen. Then we want to actually flip her image, don't we, Corey?
Yep.
So right now, when I go left, nothing happens because I haven't given the instruction for then. So let's go and do that. The quickest way to do this, guys, and again, feel free to pause if you need to catch up, is to go to search and literally just write the word flip. Okay? And when you do that, you can see all of these options have popped up for me. And I have one option here that says flip picture horizontally. Okay? So we're going to grab that one and put that in for our instruction for then. So if Bubbles' velocity is less than 0, if she's going back towards the left, then flip her. Now, there's an error here because it says picture. So we need to change that. Now, this might sound a little bit confusing because we're used to quickly clicking this arrow, Corey, aren't we, and going to Bubbles?
Yeah.
But what we've actually set here is not Bubbles the sprite. We did that at the start of the game. We've set Bubbles the image. Okay, so we need to say flip Bubbles image horizontally. All right, where do you think Corey will find Bubbles image?
Back in Sprites.
Back in Sprites, yeah. And down the very end where we set the image initially in the image area, remember? And there we go. Okay, so I'm going to grab that one and I'm going to pop that in. Get rid of picture, we don't need that. And make sure it knows it's Bubbles image we want to flip. Okay, so let's check that one out. See, does it work for us? Yes. Woo. Lion. Okay, we're doing good, Corey, and I can go back. Look. Okay.
So cool.
Really cool. Now, do you notice there is something happening there, Corey?
Yeah. So when you stop moving, Bubbles, like her position is just kind of staying to the right when we're not moving, when we're static.
Yeah, exactly. So just to point out, guys, the reason that's happening is we're saying that if Bubbles' velocity is going that way, so if I move towards the right for a second, now if Bubbles' velocity is that way, then it flips the image, but the minute Bubbles' velocity is not going that direction, it'll always go back to what we set it as at the beginning.
Okay, yeah. I get it.
Okay,
yeah.
Perfect. Now, we do want to add one more thing here, all right, because it's another thing people have talked about with us. So we've talked about velocity on X. We want to add something for Bubbles if her velocity on Y changes. So right now, remember, velocity on Y is up and down. So when I'm jumping, we want to add a little feature in here that we like the look of, don't we, Corey? Yeah. So we're going to do an else if then statement, okay? So we're going to go plus. It's not else, it's else if. So I'm going to actually hit the plus again. Get rid of else. We're just going to have this one here. And we're talking about jumping here and going up and down. So Corey, in that instance, what are we looking at? Our velocity is now going to be on
Y.
Y, exactly. So to speed it up here, guys, I'm going to quickly click on this block here, the one that's in the middle that I replaced true with. I'm going to right click and I'm going to duplicate, okay? And I'm going to drag that, and there's a lot of blocks involved so they can move, they can be a bit jumpy, so just be careful. And I'm going to put that in there. And now we're just going to change our code so it makes sense here. So if Bubbles, and we're talking about Y now, so we're not talking about her velocity across right and left, we're talking about up and down, which is our Y axis. So we're going to change that to VY. If Bubbles' velocity is less than 0. Now let's just check our numbers are right here. So Corey, if we're jumping up, okay, it's going to be, obviously, we're going to have to think about what numbers are involved. And this is where it gets a bit confusing for people. So if at home you've done coordinate geometry and maths and stuff, you would have learned that when we look at the y-axis, that as you move upwards, the numbers are positive. Well, we are going to make this really confusing. And with arcade and with game design, it's actually the opposite for the y-axis, okay? The y-axis is what they call inverted. So it's the other way around. So actually on the y-axis, when Bubbles jumps in the air, she's entering negative numbers or negative y values there. So therefore, is that going to be greater or less than 0, Corey?
Less than 0.
Exactly. So if she's going negative, then it's going to be less than 0. So we're actually going to leave that. That's actually correct. So if Bubbles' velocity is going into the negative, that means she's jumping up in the air, okay? So what we want to do is when she jumps in the air, we want to see her legs, okay? We want to see her legs jump because she's pushed herself up in the air. We want to see her legs jump up too. So we are going to quickly do this by, again, clicking on our Set Bubbles image block and duplicating that one. And dropping that in here, okay? Now, when we click into Bubbles' image then, we're just going to adjust our pixels on the screen for our height and our width. And what will we go with, Corey? We'll say 16 by 19?
18 or 19, yeah.
Yeah, 19. Okay, let's do that one. So we're just changing down below there so we can see a little bit underneath. And we're just going to give Bubbles some legs, basically. Now, okay, happy enough, Corey?
Yep, that looks good.
Cool. So going to go in here, click on done, and let's check if this works. I'm going to start moving Bubbles on the screen over here, and I'm going to jump. Yes. Fantastic.
Ooh,
what do you think, Corey?
Good.
And if
looks
I go
really
back the way, left-hand side, jump, you can see the legs. Happy out. Okay, so we've got that far. We've adjusted things that people have asked us to do, so that's all good. So Corey, do you want to now start adding a few more bits to the first level of our game here?
Yeah, let's do it. Okay,
Perfect.
I'm just going to share my screen here. Let me know if you can see. Yep.
Yeah, good to go.
Okay, so I actually see in the Q&A there's some really good questions, and someone asked, how can we make a collection like we did the hearts with other things? And that's actually what we're going to do next. So good question. What I want to do now is, okay, if I play my simulator over here, I have my hearts. So when I overlap with the hearts, I get a life. But let's include something in our tile map that when we overlap with it, we get a score or a point. Okay, so I am going to go into, see where I have set tile map to? So let's pop back into our tile map. And in here, I'm going to create a new placeholder. Okay, because remember the red tiles were the placeholders for our hearts. Well, this time I'm going to create a new tile, and I'll just make it orange or something. So let's everybody click into create a new tile. And with our bucket or our fill tool, let's just make the whole thing orange and press done. Now, I'm going to place these orange tiles wherever I want my new sprite to be. So what do you think, Amanda? Will I go with chicken bones or something for my new sprite?
Yeah, I think you're a big fan of chickens.
Yeah, so let's do that. Okay, so I'm going to take this orange tile and I'm going to put it wherever I want a chicken bone to be. So I'm going to go there, and let's say here. Okay, and then I'm going to press done. And remember to pause me at any stage if you want to catch up or you're working on a different tile map or a different color or so on. So I'm going to press done. And now what I'm going to do is very similar to how I created my hearts. Okay, so I'm going to come down here. And underneath set bubbles position, we're going to go into loops. And we are going to take out 4 element value of list. So let's pop this in here. And it's not a list that I'm after, isn't it, Amanda? It's an array, okay? Remember, that's what we focused on last week. So what I want everyone to do is go into scene. And we're going to look for that array block that we've been working with. So here we go. Array of all transparent locations, or array of all tile locations. Let's take this and let's put it in instead of list. Okay. And what do I want this tile to be? The orange tile that I just created. Okay. So what I want to say is anytime there's an orange tile, I want to create a new sprite. So everybody, let's go into sprites. And our first block of code that we're super used to, let's take this out and let's create it. So I'm not going to call it my sprite. I'm going to rename it. So let's rename it to chicken bone. Very creative name there. And the sprite that I'm going to use is, let me see if there's anything in the gallery that can help me out here so I don't have to draw it. Okay, I'm going to go for this one here because if I actually hover over it, it says that it's a small drumstick, whereas that one here is actually a larger one. So let's click on the smaller one. And press done. Now, I don't want my chicken bone to be the player. Okay, Bubbles is the player. So let's click on player, and I'm actually going to add a new kind. Remember we talked about this last week. When your game becomes quite complex and more advanced, you kind of run out of kinds of sprites. So I'm actually going to create a new one, and I'm going to just call it chicken. Okay. And press OK. Now, how do I get those chicken bones wherever I put those tiles? Okay, well, I do that by using my scene category, okay? See where we've done it there with hearts. So I want to place my chicken bone on top of those tiles. So let's see if we can find a block of code that says place. Yep, I think that looks good. So place my sprite on top of tile map, okay? So let's take this one out here. And remember to pause me at any stage if you want to catch up. So I'm going to take this out and I'm going to pop it in here, okay? Now be careful where you pop it, okay? Because we want to put it in underneath our sprite. Now, I want to say, okay, chicken bone, I want you to be wherever that orange tile is. And what is that orange tile? It's our value. See that? So take value and let's put it here. Now, let's just test our code and see if it's working because it's important to test as we go. So let me see if I can see, aha, ooh, gone. That was short-lived. Okay, well, we've seen that there, but just for reference, there we go. Okay, our chicken bone is there, but it's on top of that orange tile. I don't want to be able to see that orange tile, and that's where our transparency comes in, okay? So let's set our tile to be invisible. Let's go into scene, and let's take out, let's see, go down to tiles. Aha, this one here. See this? Set invisible or transparent. Bring that down. And now I want the tile to be invisible. And what is our tile? It's our value. So let's take value again and let's put it in instead of that block of code there. And it should just pop in. Now, let me see if this works. Wish me luck.
Look.
Woo! Okay, so we have our chicken bones. And there's no orange tile behind them, and they're exactly where I placed them in the tile map, so I'm delighted with myself. Okay, but nothing happens when I overlap them. So let's make this game more interesting. What do you think, Amanda?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, I want to say if Bubbles overlaps with a chicken bone, will we give ourselves a point?
Think if we get a score, yeah. So instead of a life, we'll use scores maybe.
Good idea. So we are super used to overlaps and sprites overlapping. So let's go into sprites and let's take out our overlap block. Okay, so this long one here. Now, this time we want to say if Bubbles, who is our player, overlaps with the chicken. Okay, because that's our new kind. I want to give myself a score, so I'm going to go into info because that's where I found my life. So that's might be where I find my score. And let's see, I see score and change score by 1. Okay, and now if you're at home, you can change your score by 5 if you want. This is completely up to you, okay? I'm just going to go for 1 for now. Now, we know from previous games, what's going to be the problem here, Amanda, if I just leave that code at that?
So what will happen is when we overlap with the chicken, we'll get a score by 1, but the chicken still is there. So we could literally stand at the chicken and just keep getting scores. Exactly.
So what we need to do is we need to destroy the chicken bone once we overlap with it. So let's go into sprites and our friend that we've used a few times now, destroy my sprite. And let's bring that under. So yeah, I want to destroy the chicken bone, but we know this from our Nemo game that we need to bring down the other sprite, okay? Because this other sprite, this block here, means the one that I just overlapped with, okay? If I just left it at that, the program will destroy any chicken bone that it wants, okay? It's not specific enough. What we want to say is the one that Bubbles just overlapped with, so the other sprite is the one I want to destroy. And then if you want, you can press the plus button and say with, I'm going to say with smiles. Now, let's see. I'm sure that works, but let's just test it because it's important to test as we go. Woohoo! Okay, I got a point. Let's make it a little bit harder though. I'm going to be hard on myself here, because if you think about it, Bubbles is getting loves or lives and she's getting scores, but there's no consequences to this game yet. So let's make it so when Bubbles overlaps with the chicken, she gets a point, but a fly comes in then or something, like you can make it a wasp or a bee and starts chasing Bubbles, okay? So what we need to do here is we need to actually create a new sprite. Okay, so let's go into sprites.
It's going to be kind of like an enemy, is it, Corey?
Yeah, exactly.
This is our enemy now. Yeah, cool.
This is someone that we want to avoid. All right. So let's take out set my sprite and let's bring it in. And it's not going to be chicken bone, but be careful here. Okay, this happened to me a couple of times. If I go and rename this variable now, I haven't made a new one. Okay, we have something called chicken bone. So make sure you don't rename this. Make sure you actually create a new variable here. This just happens sometimes and it can kind of get your sequence of your game just a little bit messed up. So don't worry if it happens. It's just a case of going in and creating a new variable. And I'm going to call this fly. It's the only name I can come up with for now, but I'm sure you have way more creative names. Now, I am going to make my fly the enemy. And I'm actually not going to set it to be a sprite of anything at the moment because I want this fly to be animated, okay? So I could go in there, but it wouldn't make any difference because I'm using an animation. See the way I done with my hearts up here? Okay, because my heart was an animation, I didn't actually have to set it to anything in the gallery or draw it. And I'm doing the same.
Sorry, for people who maybe just joined, do you want to just point out where they can get the animation category?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, good point. So how you can get the animations is in advanced. You're going to go into extensions. And I don't have it here because I've already done it, but your animations will be just around here. And just click on that, and then it loads into your game, and you have the option here.
Brilliant.
Okay, so let's click into animation. And I'm going to take out the first block of code. And what is the sprite that I want to animate?
The fly.
My fly. And the frames is where you're going to draw this. Okay, so I'm going to try my best here. Okay, here we go. I'm going to try to create a like little body of some sort. Ooh. And let's see. I'm sure everyone's pixel art at home will be much better than mine, but I've been trying to practice it. What do you think? They're the wings.
Yeah, go with it.
Looking good. And will I give it a little? There we go. Now, we know from last week that we could just leave it like that, but I want mine to kind of move. So I'm actually going to add, see this plus button? I'm going to add another frame so it looks like the fly is moving. And this time I'm just going to do the fly again. I actually could have duplicated that there, so that was a mistake on my part. I could have just duplicated it and it would have been the exact same fly. I wouldn't have had to draw it again. But this time I'm literally just going to do the fly with no wings. So there it is there. And I can go up here with this little play button and I can see what it looks like. Ah, that looks good.
Very good.
I'm happy with that. Okay, so I'm going to press done. And just be sure to loop it because this means that it's just going to keep animating forever. Okay, now I could play this, but you're not going to see this at the moment. Okay, you're actually not going to see the fly because we need to set the fly's position. But importantly, I want the fly to come in at a certain angle. Okay, I want the fly to come in relative to wherever Bubbles is on the screen. Because it doesn't make any sense for the flies to come in at the start of the game if you're already at the middle of your tile map. So what we need to do is we need to set the fly's position to be wherever Bubbles is, okay? And I'm just going to hop into PowerPoint really quickly to show you how we're going to do this, okay? So this is our X and Y axis that we're working on. And we have Bubbles here, let's say. And Bubbles' position is 64 on X and 58 on Y. That's just Bubbles' position. Now, I want to set the fly to be plus 80 away from wherever Bubbles is on X, okay? So wherever Bubbles is on X, which is here, I want the fly to be plus 80, okay? And we know our plus on the X-axis is this side. So let's see where the fly would be then. Okay, so that means the fly would be there. That's good, but I also want to set the enemy to be minus 80 away from bubbles on the y-axis, okay? So if I'm looking for it to be minus 80 away from bubbles, Amanda, do you think the fly is going to be in this area or this area?
I think we're talking, remember what we said about the y-axis being different and flipping actually what it normally is in maths. So I think we're going to be talking about going up into the top right corner, aren't we?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So if I get 58 and I take away 80 from that, I'm going to get a minus number. I'm going to get minus 22. So in theory, what we're going to do next, okay, we're going to input these plus 80 and minus 80, and that means our fly should come in around here to wherever bubbles is on the screen. And this is going to make way more sense than when we actually work on it in our cage. So we need to set the sprite's position, and you've done this with Amanda at the start, okay? So you went into sprites and you took out set my sprite position. Now, let's change our variable here to to fly, because we're setting the fly's position. And one thing I'd recommend is just to pause me as much as you can in the next couple of steps, because there's a lot of blocks we're inserting here, okay? So we are working with maths, okay? So we're going to go into the maths block. And let's take out the first one, 0 plus 0. Now, Amanda, what did I say we were going to do on the x-axis for the fly? Were we going to plus or are we going to minus?
Yeah, so we were going to add, because we want the x-axis, we want the fly to come in from the right-hand side of the screen, so it'll be plus 80.
Exactly. So see how I took out that block? I'm going to put it into x, okay? And now I'm going to look at y, and I said I wanted to be minus, didn't I?
Yeah.
So let's take 0 minus 0, and let's put this, and carefully watching where I'm putting it now, because sometimes, because there's a lot of code, the y is at the highlight in yellow, so I'm good to go. Now, pause me and make sure that you have that bit done before we move on, okay? The next thing that we want to do is we want to say we want the fly's position on x to be wherever bubbles is on x. And where have we seen that before? We've seen it in sprites. Okay, so let's take out my sprite x. And let's bring this out. And I'm going to put it in the very first 0 there. See this? You can kind of see it's highlighting. Now, I'm going to change chicken bone to bubbles. And how many did I say I wanted plus?
80.
80, exactly. So all this means is the fly is going to be wherever bubbles is on the x-axis, plus 80. Okay, so 80 away from her. And we want to do the exact same for y. So we want to take out the exact same block of code, and I could duplicate it, but I'm just going to go in the long way. I'm going to take this out. I'm watching where I'm putting it now. See where the y is? I'm putting it at that 0. And again, changing it to bubbles. And what did I say I wanted it to minus?
80 as well, wasn't it?
80 as well, exactly. So now all that means is my fly is going to come in relative to wherever bubbles is, all right? And I could try this out, but I don't think we'll see it because we're missing one bit of code. So maybe if I jump, okay, yeah, you can see them there. Okay, I need to get the fly to actually follow bubbles. And how I do that is, it's actually a new line of code. I don't think we've worked with it yet, have we, Amanda?
With the follow?
With the follow, yeah, I don't think we have.
Not in this game, maybe.
It's like my favorite block, so I can't believe I haven't done it yet. So if you go into sprites and you take out set my enemy to follow my sprite. And I'm going to say, oh, sorry everyone at home, I just noticed a bug there. Shouldn't this be Y, Amanda?
Ah, yes.
So sorry everyone, just make sure that if you were following me, just pause for a second and make sure it's bubble X plus 80 and then bubbles Y minus 80. Okay, so I'll just leave that there for a second if you just want to pause to make sure that you have it right. Now, I'm going to say get the fly to follow bubbles. And that's all good. But if I press this plus button here, I'm intrigued by this. And it's saying with speed 100. Now, I really don't think I'll be able to get away from the flies if it's at 100. 100 is the maximum speed these flies can go. What will I say, Amanda?
We say 50 or 60 maybe.
Yeah, I'll go 50. I'll go easy on myself. But you can do whatever you want at home. If you want a challenge, leave it at 100. Okay, now let's try this out. Okay, I'm ready to go.
Here we go. Whoa.
Okay.
Sorry, it's nearly like the size of a bat, these flies.
Yeah, maybe I should rename it to bat. That it kind of looks like that, doesn't it? Okay, brilliant. So one more thing before we finish off today is I want a way to overcome these flies, okay? So it's all well and good that they're going to come at me when I get a chicken bone, but let's say that, what, if I can jump over them maybe, Amanda?
Yeah, well, I suppose if they do catch you, you know, it would be probably right to lose a life. But then maybe if you can evade them by, yeah, jumping over them, then we maybe gain a point or gain a life.
Okay, good point. So let's do that before we finish up, okay? So I am going to work with overlaps here because what I want to say is when the player overlaps with the enemy, because our fly is an enemy. So let's go into sprites and let's take out overlaps. And we're saying when the player overlaps with the fly and our fly is an enemy, I am going to, first of all, destroy the fly, okay? Because that's what we do, isn't it? We usually say, when we overlap with something, like get rid of it. So let's destroy. And we're super used to this now. Let's take other sprite and put it in there instead. Now, we're going to need a conditional statement here, okay? But not to worry because we're really good at them. I want to go into my logic and I want to take out if true, then else, because we're going to need an else as well. So let's go with the second block. Okay. And make sure you're pausing, make sure you're up to this point, okay? So pause on the screen there, and there's the block of code that we're going to be working on. Now, we're going to need a comparator, okay? And I did see someone in the Q&A was saying that they couldn't get their sprite to fit into there, and that's because we need our comparator, and we find that in logic. So let's take out 0 less than 0. What do you think, Amanda?
Yeah, I think that's the one we're going to be working with.
And let's put that in here. And all we want to say that if Bubbles is higher or is able to jump over the fly, well, then we get a life. Okay. So what axis are we working with here if we're jumping?
So we're working here, Corey, with the y-axis again, aren't we?
Yeah.
And I suppose the higher Bubbles jumps, we have to remember, because our y-axis is inverted, the higher Bubbles jumps, the more negative her number is going to be. Exactly.
So we are going to go into my sprites. And this block here, my sprite X, let's put it into the first 0. And let's change chicken bone to Bubbles. And and X to Y. Now, we want to say that if wherever Bubbles is less than where our fly is on Y, that would mean that Bubbles is higher, doesn't it?
Yeah, because that means her Bubbles number is more negative than the fly's number, so it's less than it. Yeah,
exactly. Sometimes it can be a bit confusing. You just have to keep reminding yourself. That's why I'm talking to myself, kind of.
Me too.
Yeah, this is how we get through it. So if Bubbles Y is more negative than where the fly is, well, then I'm actually going to give myself a life. Do you know that? Let's see, change life by 1. Or else the fly is going to get me. So I'm going to change my life by -1. Now, when I first done this game, I made that -3 and I couldn't complete the game. It was too hard. So you could try it if you want at -3, but if you want to finish the game, I'd say leave it at a low enough number. So we are after completing so much. So let's just test this game before we wrap up. Okay, I'm after getting a life. Oh, because I got my heart. And let's see if I can get the chicken bone. Now, I'm actually after getting a score there, but I'm going to let the fly get me. Oh, it didn't get rid of a life there. Let me just say, change life by 1, change life by -1. Ah, sorry, I was looking at my score. It did take away a life. You could change that to change score by 1, couldn't you, Amanda?
Yeah, if you wanted. Some people might prefer to use scores than lives. That's up to people to add their own twist to the game.
Exactly. But if I let that fly get me there, I lost a life. Okay. So I think that is everything for today. I'm going to pass you back on over to Amanda, who's going to go through a recap and your home challenge. Well done, everyone, and see you next week.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks, Corey. That was brilliant, everyone. Well done. And again, like a lot of work done there, looking at more arrays, looking a lot at coordinates and axes and all that stuff. So it's a lot to take in. So hopefully everyone got through it there okay. We'll address some questions in a second. But your home challenge. So we're happy with where we've got that game to be. And so we're going to call that game that we've just done level 1. So that's level 1 with all the different types of sprites, with different types of kind. And then we have an end goal that we win on, and we have an area to get trapped. So we're happy with that as level 1. Next week, we are going to escalate that. When you get to the end, you go into level 2. So for your home challenge, what we want you to do is prep for level 2. So if you go to aka.ms/homespace files and into the arcade section again, you will see there's a PDF file there, and in it there's just some nice handy pages where if you could print them at home, then you could actually sketch over a tile map template. You could sketch over a sprite template and have that all ready to go, so that when you come back next week and we add level 2, you know exactly what you want your tile map to look like. You know exactly what you maybe want some newer sprites to look like, and what you want your rules to be. So we can look at all of that. Now, if anyone has any suggestions actually of things they might want to add to their game and they're wondering how could I do that, feel free to add it into the Q&A now actually, because we'll have a look at that and then we'll see can we actually prep that for you and show you something you can add to your game, kind of like we did to start today where we showed you how we can flip the image of the sprite and things like that. So that's the home challenge. Get ready for level 2 using our template. If you can't print it at home, you can just open up the file and have a look at the types of things that you can do in preparation. All right. Now we'll have a quick look at some Q&As. All right. So let's see, Corey. So the first thing is there's a question here about the chicken bone. Could it be more like the hearts? I assume they mean like animated.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, you could do that. Just have a look back at how we done the heart, and it was literally just an animation. So if you want to have the chicken bone, or maybe I think I seen someone there has a coin instead of a chicken bone. Super creative. I wish I had a thought of that. You can animate that as well. So
perfect.
Definitely.
Okay, brilliant. And then there's a question here, but I think we might have answered it about the sprites. So if we can have in level 2, if we can have some new sprites, which we can, can't we?
Oh yeah, definitely. We can have a look next week at working on some more sprites that are introduced to the game. But also remember if you were around when we were doing the Nemo game, when Nemo got to level 2, their image changed. So if you want to do that as well, you can. That's completely up to you.
And that's on that file. You can see there's a tile map template to sketch out maybe what a new tile map might look like.
Exactly.
So that's really cool. I'm really excited to see how level 2 is going to work. Okay. So that's everything, guys. Thank you so much again for sticking with us during that. I hope everyone got on well. And make sure to join us next week to keep building on our design. Obviously, all our files and all our videos, if you need to catch up or you need to look back over anything in preparation, you can find them at that webpage with all of our resources as well, our home challenges and our coding files. All of that stuff is on our HomeSpace files link that you can see on the screen now. And until then, we'll chat to you next week. Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.